Welcome back to Legends from the Holler. Now listen close, y'all. There's a certain kind of hush that falls over these mountains when the sun finally dips behind the tallest ridge. A deep, heavy quiet, like the whole woods just took a breath and is holding it. If you grew up around here, you know that ain't no ordinary quiet. That hush means something's listening, something's watching. And in these deep, winding southern hollers, the folks who've lived here for generations, they've got a word for the things that listen back. The things that answer you when you least expect it. They call 'em haints now. Don't you go thinking these are your grandma's friendly little ghosts, floating around in the attic or rocking in her favorite chair? Oh no, these haints are something else entirely. They're older than memory, steeped in the very earth and the whispers of folks who came before, carrying tales from faraway shores and deep hollers alike. They're meaner too, a lot meaner. And they don't much care if you're a big city skeptic with all your fancy science, or just a lost traveler whose phone battery went dead on a dark road. They don't care if you believe in them or not. They just are. Tonight I'm going to tell you 3 true encounters. Tales passed down from folks who swore on a stack of Bibles what they saw and heard. After you hear them, after these stories settle deep in your bones, you'll understand why every single porch light on every single mile of winding road in these parts burns steady, bright as a star, till the first sliver of dawn breaks the horizon. It ain't just for welcome, bless your heart. It's for protection. Picture this if you can. It was a Tuesday, late October, back in 1987, a moonless night, black as pitch, where the stars themselves seemed too scared to peek through the thick canopy of trees. A coal truck, empty and rattling like a skeleton over a washboard, was making its way up a gravel trace road they call Trace Fork. The driver, a man named Darrell Calley, was 32, solid as an oak, and known for being as sober as a judge. He wasn't the type to spook easy, not Darrell. He'd seen his share of strange things in these mountains, but nothing like what was cumin for him that night. Darrell told the state trooper later, his voice still shaky, that he'd rolled his window down because the cab of that old truck started smelling like pure, unadulterated sulfur, like a match struck in hell or something died a slow, fiery death right there in the bed of his truck. He figured maybe a possum or a coon had crawled in and met its end. But it wasn't no critter. Not by a long shot. Then he saw her, standing right there in the middle of the road, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of his headlights. A woman, barefoot, her dress, some old gray thing, clung to her like she'd just stepped out of a creek, dripping wet. Her hair, long and black, hung over her face, hiding whatever was beneath. He slammed on the brakes hard, the old truck fishtailing on the loose gravel, screaming in protest. As the headlights finally steadied on her, she lifted her head slow, like real slow, and looked right at him. Darrell said her face. Well, her face had no eyes. Just 2 holes, blacker than the deepest coal seam, darker than the hollow itself on that moonless night. He didn't wait around for a second look. He just threw that truck into reverse and backed out of there faster than a scalded dog. Darrell's story, mind you, it made the local paper. 4 inches of print, right there next to the livestock report, like it was just another everyday occurrence. And that, my friends, is the first reason you never ever enter these hollers after dark. Sometimes the road itself wants payment, and it'll take it in fear or worse. The Eyeless woman of Trace Fork, Darrell's family, good, honest folk, they swore up and down that he hadn't touched a drop of whiskey that whole shift. He was a teetotaler, always had been. So when he came stumbling home that night, pale as a fresh dug root, babbling about the woman in the road, they knew something truly unnatural had happened. When the wrecker finally arrived the next morning to haul his truck out of the ditch it had ended up in, the engine was still idle. The driver's door wide open, swinging in the morning breeze like an invitation to something terrible. And all around the cab, pressed deep into the muddy ground, were footprints, not Darrell's. These were bare human footprints, circling the truck, pacing like something was waiting for him to come back. Then they just vanished at the ditch line. Like the thing that made them had simply dissolved into the wet earth. The trooper who took Darrell's report, a seasoned old veteran named Corporal Jenkins, he noted in his official write-up that the smell of sulfur, that same awful smell Darrell had described, still lingered in the air, thick and acrid, even through the steady drizzle of rain that had started at dawn. It wasn't just a figment of Darrell's imagination, it was real. And it was terrifying. After that night, things changed round Trace Fork. Folks started leaving work early, rushing home before dusk. Nobody, and I mean nobody, would drive that stretch of road between twilight and dawn, not for love nor money. They'd take the long way, adding an hour or more to their commute, just to avoid that cursed patch of gravel. There were whispers, of course, about what Daryl had seen. Some said it was the ghost of a woman who drowned in the creek decades ago, always looking for something she'd lost. Others said it was a haint, pure and simple, a malevolent spirit tied to the land, seeking to lure the unwary to their doom. A year later, the county decided to grade the road, try to smooth out the ruts, and put down some fresh gravel. Maybe folks hoped a new surface would wipe away the bad memories, but it didn't. The machine operator, a gruff old fellow who'd been driven dozers since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, swore his machine stalled, just flat-out died. At the exact spot where Daryl Colley had seen the woman, and then, clear as a bell over the sputterin' engine, he heard it. A woman humming Cold Rain and Snow, a mournful old tune his own grandma used to sing at funerals. The crew wouldn't finish the job. Not until the local preacher came out and sprinkled creek water, blessed it with a prayer all over the dozer blade and the stretch of road. Even then, they were jumpy. To this day, if you ask folks from that area why they still take the long way around, why they avoid Trace Fork after dark, they'll just look at you with wide, knowing eyes and tell you. Some roads, bless their hearts, they remember bad ends and they ain't afraid to collect new ones. It's a payment, you see, a toll, and the price is often more than you're willing to give. The land here, it's got a memory, a deep, dark memory that stretches back further than any living soul can recall. And some of those memories, they don't stay buried. The trick horse in the Carter Fold. Our second tale, it comes from the Carter Fold way up on the backside of Clinch Mountain, back in 1995. Now, the old fairgrounds there. It used to be the place where teenagers would go to park, you know, find a little privacy. They'd listen to bluegrass on the radio, steam up the windows, just bean kids. It was a rite of passage, almost. But one October night, a night just like any other, 3 kids, a brother and his 2 younger sisters, were out there doing just that. They were sitting in their daddy's beat-up Ford pickup, the radio playing some fast-paced fiddle tunes. When they heard it, the distinct clip-clop of hooves on the asphalt, coming up behind them, slow and steady. They figured it was just a pony, maybe escaped from one of the nearby pastures, looking for a late-night snack. Happens all the time, right? Then the shape passed under the single flickering mercury light that still stood sentinel over the fairgrounds entrance, and that's when their blood ran cold. This wasn't no pony, this was a horse, tall, gaunt, its ribs showing through its matted coat like a skeletal cage, its mane long and stringy, dripped with something black and slick, something that wasn't water, and its head. Oh, its head jerked side to side, up and down, with a horrifying, unnatural motion, like a puppet on broken strings. It didn't move like a living creature. It moved like something that had been put together wrong, something that was just weird the shape of a horse. Then it spoke. Clear as a bell, a voice that was too deep, too guttural for any horse. It said, "Get home before the dew falls." The kids screamed. All 3 of them, a high, panicked sound that echoed in the cold night air. The brother, bless his heart, he slammed his foot down on the gas pedal, trying to get that old truck moving. But the engine, like it had a mind of its own, just coughed. And coughed again. It sputtered and died, leaving them in the terrifying silence, trapped with the thing that called itself a horse. And then the radio dial, the one that had been tuned to the local bluegrass station, it started to spin, on its own. It spun and spun, past all the stations they knew, past all the static, and landed on a frequency that hadn't existed since the 50s. And from the speakers, a crackling voice filled the cab. Not music, but a sermon. A fire and brimstone sermon preaching about hellfire and damnation, about the wages of sin and the darkness that waits for those who stray. When the car finally, mercifully, kicked over coughing back to life, the horse was gone, vanished. Only the faint, sickening smell of wet hay and fresh blood lingered in the air. A phantom scent that clung to their clothes and their memories. Their mama, a strong woman of faith, took them straight to church the next morning, not for forgiveness, but for protection. The pastor, after hearing their wild, terrified story, looked at them with a somber expression and said, "Children, what you met last night, that wasn't flesh and blood. That was a trick horse, a haint that borrows a shape to deliver warnings." From that night on, parents in the Carter Fold started enforcing curfews so strict, so ironclad that the old fairgrounds parking lot sits empty to this very day. No more teenage rendezvous there. The kids still text about it though. They've got a code phrase, passed down from older siblings to younger ones. dew falls. And if you hear that, it means get indoors. No questions asked, no arguments, no excuses. Because some warnings, they're meant to be heeded. And some things that walk these mountains, they ain't playing games. They're just making sure you know your place and your time. Now, I've got one more story for you, and I reckon it's the worst of the three. It's the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart pound a little faster. But first, before we dive into that one, if these old mountains have ever whispered your name, if you've ever felt a chill that wasn't just the wind, then go on and tap that like button. It lets the algorithm know you're still alive out there, still listening to these old tales. And if you've got your own holler tale, a story from your neck of the woods that you just can't explain, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, I swear. Mind you, usually with all the lights on. The Lantern Boy of Pond Ridge. This last one, it happened just last year, fresh in folks' minds. It is, up on Pond Ridge, just shy of the Kentucky line, where the trees grow thick, and the silence can be deafening. A couple from the city, they bought themselves a cabin up there. Wanted quiet, they said. Wrote all about it in their fancy blog, Chasing the Simple Life, they called it. They thought they were escaping the hustle and bustle, finding peace. What they found was something else entirely. Their first night in that old cabin, as the sun dipped and the shadows grew long and twisted, they heard it. A child outside, a small, thin voice, calling for help. Help me, it cried. I dropped my lantern. It repeated it over and over, the voice sounding so small, so lost, like a little bird caught in the dark. The husband, bless his naive heart, grabbed a flashlight. His wife, a bit more cautious, stayed on the porch, holding tight to the doorframe. He followed the voice downslope, toward the creek bed. The beam of his flashlight cut in a shaky path through the gloom, but each time he thought he was getting close, each time he called out, "Where are you, little one?" The voice moved, luring him deeper into the woods, deeper into the tangled undergrowth and the heavy breathing darkness. He walked for what felt like an eternity, his heart pounding in his chest, the chill of the night seeping into his bones. After maybe 30 minutes, a cold, hard realization hit him. The crickets, they had quit. Not a single chirp. And the wind, which had been rustling the leaves just moments before, had died down entirely. The creek, which should have been babbling nearby, was silent. No wind, no water sound, just the frantic thump-thump of his own heart, echoing in the unnatural quiet. He knew, deep in his gut, that he was in trouble. He turned to go back, to find his way to the light of the cabin. But every path he tried to take, every turn he made, ended at the same thing. An old, gnarled stump, carved with initials from 1932. A dead end every single time. It was like the woods themselves were playing a cruel, endless trick on him. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, his wife was standing on the porch, a growing sense of dread tightened around her chest. The porch light, her only beacon, suddenly burst, a sharp pop, and then darkness. Absolute, suffocating darkness. She fumbled for the door, her hands shaken, and slammed it shut, locking it with every bolt she could find. But even through the thick wood, she heard it. Small feet, pattering on the porch, circling the cabin. And then, a gentle tug on her jacket, through a crack in the doorframe. Tiny fingers. She swore, trying to pull at her. She started praying out loud, tears streaming down her face. Begging for dawn, begging for the light. When her husband finally stumbled home at dawn, scratched and bruised and half mad with fear, he found her huddled in a corner, still praying. And on the cabin door, where those tiny fingers had been, were deep, ragged scratches. Like something small but powerful had tried to dig its way inside. They didn't pack. They fled. Left everything behind, their simple life dream shattered. They never blogged again, never spoke of Pond Ridge, the old-timers round here. They know the story of the Lantern Boy. They say he was a miner's kid, lost in the woods during the Depression. His little lantern went out, and the holler, well, the holler, just kept him. Now, every October through March, folks on Pond Ridge leave lanterns burning on their porches. Not for decoration, not for welcome. It's a payment, a rent, you might say. Insurance won't cover haint damage, you see. They call it lantern rent, and if you skip a payment, if your light goes out, something comes collecting, and you don't want to be around when that happens. 3 roads, 3 warnings, and still these old mountains keep their mouths open after sunset, ready to swallow up the unwary. Maybe you tell yourself these are just stories, old wives' tales. The hills playing tricks on ears, tuned too tight, on minds too eager for a thrill. But I ask you, why does Daryl Colley walk everywhere now, even if it means miles out of his way? Why do the Carter kids never stay out past 10 o'clock, even now that they're grown with kids of their own? And why do those cabins on Pond Ridge sell cheap, real cheap, and still sit empty longer than they should, even with all that simple life charm? The hollers. They don't argue with your logic. They don't try to convince you. They simply keep what wanders too far from the light, what strays from the path, what forgets the old ways. So, if your fancy GPS claims there's a shortcut through one of these winding back roads, if the dusk sky turns that bruised, deep purple, that means night is truly falling. Remember the word folks here whisper like a prayer, haint. And remember something else too. Those porch lights you see glowing like a string of scattered stars in the distance, they ain't just welcoming you home. They're marking the very edge of safe ground. Drive on, friend, before they blink out one by one. And whatever you do, whatever you hear, don't you dare follow that little lantern that drifts away from the road, bobbing and swaying in the dark. Because once the hollers have your name, once they've tasted your fear, they don't give it back. Thank y'all for watching Legends from the Holler. Keep your porch light burning, your faith strong, and your stories close. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and don't go wandering after dark.